you tired of small talk? Me too. How do we channel spirit messages? What can angels and demons teach us? What's quantum leaping? How do we shift timelines? Who are the star seeds among us? Are dragons real? Big Souls brings big ideas down to earth. Let's plant some abundant seeds into the garden of your mind.
Welcome to Big Souls, Big Ideas. Today we're going to be talking about neurodivergence and how brilliant our brains are, especially when we allow them to just be without expectations, without limiting beliefs, without the projections of the world outside of us. And I've got a brilliant guest, Polly Miskiewicz.
Hopefully, you did it. You did it. That's okay. Yes. For a second, I was thinking I should have told you. I should have said something here about my surname, but no. Yes, you've done it. You've done it really well. Thank you. Thank you for this intro.
One long last name to another. It's lovely to have you on the podcast, and I'm excited to talk about your work with neurodivergent people and perhaps you getting to know your neurodivergence in the first place and recognizing, wait a minute, there's a different type of group of people on Earth. How did we miss that?
Yes, yeah, it's quite a story actually, but yes, we're gonna get there.
So, from your observations of the world around you and the increasing amount of information about neurodivergence everywhere, is it getting easier for neurodivergent people?
I wish I could just say, of course, right? Because with knowledge and information must come some sort of acceptance and ease and all of those beautiful things that we are all hoping for. But I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so. I think partially, yes. To a degree, I think it's much easier to find your place within a community. Mm-hmm. It's much easier to find a community and then find your place within it. But there is still that separation. There is still that idea that you have to find a separate community in which you will be accepted, most probably, and that's beautiful and that's great. And I'm all in for a community. But yes, there is still this level of a difference in separation, and that's a bit of a shame, especially considering that we are all very different, right? Mm-hmm. Neurodivergence is just a variation on the whole neurodiversity, isn't it? It's just a different level of a difference, and at least that's how I understand that, and that's how I like working with that. And kind of taking it back to what you said about my own experience and how did I come to that place where I'm now working with neurodivergent clients in my practice as a therapist. I was pretty lucky, I suppose, because in my upbringing, I was always a bit different, and I was always a bit different at school. But somehow, because of the environment that I grew up in, I think, I've always used that as something really positive and cool. You know, that word quirky and that word. I was never an outcast. I was never someone whose difference led to some sort of discrimination or separation. So I didn't realize how difficult it can be for some people, actually, for quite a while. And then in my practice, when people started coming through from my door who experienced the toll of neurodivergence and within the society, I started realizing, okay, this kind of difference can actually be quite difficult for some. And I started researching and learning about that, and we're probably going to talk about it. I think neurodivergent people attract neurodivergent people, and that's the only reason I think I really got into working with neurodivergent people, because somehow on some level, my clients have been attracted to me, and I don't question that, because I'm absolutely fascinated by this topic, and I live it now and breathe it, live it and breathe it. Yeah, sorry about my accent and confusion there. Yeah, does that answer your question? I don't think it's easier. I think it's easier to gain information. I think it's easier to find a community, but being it and experiencing it and living with this experience is not necessarily easier yet. Yeah.
It can be liberating when you reach a certain age and you finally find a name for it. that. So this is
yeah.
what it's been. Because I found that I was on the spectrum around 30, age 30, which
Hmm.
is 30 years of living, knowing that I'm different,
Yeah.
being reminded that I'm different, having all these
Mm.
examples of my differences, and thinking to myself, well, I'm just introverted. I'm just interested about
Yes.
these things. I'm always bringing it back to myself. But that in
Mm.
itself is a little bit of a harsh self judgment, I suppose. Oh, it's me. I am the one. I'm the one. And it's,
Yeah.
I've always taken it upon myself to not judge others for not understanding me.
Yeah.
But now there's this huge gap where education is not bringing more resources or specialists,
Yeah.
where workplaces are not qualified to welcome the diversity of minds that they wish to have in order for them to bring innovation in society. And
Hmm.
so the more aware you become of your own nature, your own diagnosis, if you will, the more the responsibility is back on yourself. What can I do?
Right. Especially if there are some resources, you just need to kind of
Exactly.
reach for them and look for them. And yeah, 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 I see that. I feel that. Well, that's interesting. So you've been diagnosed for a few years now?
Few years. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I actually do not hold an official diagnosis. I went through the process with my therapist in the
I don't
past.
either,
Yeah,
but
there you go. Mm.
and
Yeah,
I've
so
had that conversation with my parents where I'm like, "Well, I think I'm autistic," a couple of times, and they're like, "No, you're not." And I was like, "Okay, we're not gonna make progress here. That's okay."
yeah, 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 let's shelve that. Let's just yeah, yes. Yeah, that's it. That's another one, isn't it? Very often with the process of official diagnosis, you are encouraged to invite your family members or people who know you or
Mhm,
have known you for a period of time, especially through your childhood, throughout your childhood, to give their testimonial, right? And
mhm,
that also brings quite a lot of interesting stories and both beautiful insight because that's what I've sat with many of times, but also very often this kind of not rejection of the idea, but
painful acceptance.
oh yeah, I mean we can understand that, right? This the admission that okay, my child or yeah, my child, let's say, might have experienced something early on in their lives that I have not noticed or I have not had words to name, even because we're not talking here about a mistake, right?
Mhm,
We're
yeah,
talking here potentially about something that parents were simply not aware of, you know.
mhm,
We teach parents very little, first of all, let's admit that, you know, or people who are about to become parents. I've got a very strong opinion about how it should look like, but it doesn't look anything like that, right? You're being taught how to change a nappy, but you're not being taught how to look after your child's
emotional
emotional.
intelligence. Mhm,
Exactly. Um, so it's not about pointing out your parents' mistakes, but I think very often to the parent it feels a little bit like that. It feels like they're failed a
mhm.
child, or so it's easier to just negate it, to just say no, has not happened. Nope, you're just absolutely normal and fine, and yeah, there was nothing to see, nothing to notice, because
Yeah.
if I loved you, I would have noticed. But that's a huge mistake.
I think for anyone that tries to bring their neurodivergent diagnosis, let's put it that as a word, as a label for the moment,
Mm,
they're sharing it with you because they want to work with you so that you can change and grow together, so that you can continue to co-create life as it is and then
yes,
the next version. I don't come to people and share, hey, I'm neurodivergent because I want them to make excuses for me or something like that.
exactly. Yeah.
I'd rather explain to them I'm wired differently, but I bring all of these awesome things as well. It's
Mm,
just that
mm,
my social abilities might be a little bit different on some days because my capacity, energetically speaking, is just not going to be there. And there's nothing I
yes.
can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, it's a funny one because yeah, it's about both sides, isn't it? Because it's how we relate, and we both at that point when someone comes to us, or if we go to somebody to talk about that, we both hold our bias, we both
Mhm,
hold our ideas and our kind of preconceptions about the topic and about the other person and about ourselves. So there is a layer upon layer of things that need to be kind of uncovered and thought about before we can actually just show up. And as we know, and you know, there is also masking that
mhm,
that comes to my mind when we talk about this showing up, and about suddenly, sometimes very suddenly for some, coming up to a partner or a parent and saying, listen, I now realized that the person that you were relating to for quite a while maybe wasn't really fully the person that I am. How confusing is that? How now I've got needs that I'm aware of, and I'm ready to say what they are. What are you going to do with that? It's dramatic in many ways. It's the beginning and the end for a lot of people, for a lot of aspects of a person, right? Just this morning, I spoke with someone, I exchanged thoughts with someone on LinkedIn about how grief is such a huge aspect of becoming aware of your neurodivergence. And it is. Oh, hugely it is. I'm a Jungian art psychotherapist, and ideas that Carl Gustav Jung brings into psychotherapy are very close to my heart. They've always been. I wrote my master's thesis on the process of individuation, so the process of becoming who we really are through integrating the elements of ourselves, right? And kind of admitting that there is more than one thing about us that makes us who we are. And that comes with grief, because some of the parts we might need to recognize that are not serving us, right? Or other parts are more important, and we want them to surface in a particular time of our life for us to feel like we are ourselves. So there is grief and there is growth, and that can be very scary for our friends, for our families, for ourselves, obviously, but for everyone involved in relation to us, in relating with us, right? So such a complex topic we're tackling here, right?
It is, but we
Nothing
need to
easier.
talk about it. Yeah.
And the process of becoming who we really are, just that one thing, it's that one question: who are you? Who are you?
I would say neurotypicals have it a little bit easier. I don't think
Yeah.
they go into such self-analysis that we do, because even from the beginning, we have almost more access to that emotional depth that's within all of us. We just have that easier access. So we almost get overwhelmed by it, and we want to share what we found with our guardians, our teachers, and they're like, shh, we don't talk about these things here. Quiet, child, be normal, right? We start hearing these things from when we're quite little. And one of the ideas about neurodivergent masking is that it's often very difficult to diagnose someone as neurodivergent or autistic, or put the label ADHD, because they're so good at masking. They've been told time and time and time again, fit in, be good, play nice, and be like the rest. And so I would love to unpack with you what actually is neurodivergent masking. And you mentioned it quite well, that grief that comes when you realize that you've been betraying yourself for a long time in order to play by the rules society set out for you. That can bring a whole avalanche of emotions, and you would want to even hide more, knowing everything that you know.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a complex, when we think about a mask, we think about something pretty straightforward. I'm something, I don't want to be represented by that image. I'm putting a mask on, it covers it up, and that's it. Whilst the neurodivergent masking is so much more complex than that, like it's layers upon layers upon layers, right? And so how I see it, it's this kind of both conscious, subconscious, unconscious, all the levels, process of suppressing, but also overcompensating. It's a process of acting in a way that allows us to survive, right? So to me, it's layers of behaviors mostly that we acquire, and we, in conscious or unconscious way, decide to take on as our own with the goal in mind, again, consciously, subconsciously, because we've learned that it worked, or completely unconsciously. We adapt those behaviors so that we can survive. We can emotionally survive, and we can help ourselves to feel safe, right? At least to a level. That safety, I think, is an extremely important aspect of why masking happens, why it occurs at all. We create, through our behaviors that we choose, again, consciously, unconsciously, we create an environment in which we are not being poked, we're not being maybe challenged in a way that we couldn't survive, because we couldn't, as neurodivergent people, very often we couldn't survive some of those challenges, emotionally survive some of those challenges. So we create an environment in which we very often have to present, in kind of Winnicott terms, the false self instead of our true self, to protect ourselves from challenge, rejection, criticism, emotional collapse, basically. Something that we couldn't handle, right? We could see it as one persona, so like one idea of ourselves that we tested in certain environments, taking over our whole self. So like in Jungian terms, you know, we have a lot of different personas that we adapt for different circumstances. So we've got a different persona that we take to work, and that's quite healthy. You know, that means that we are going, we're acting according to societal rules, etc. and so on. But in terms of masking, we could see it as one persona just completely taking over. We forget about everything else, the needs of all the other parts of ourselves, and that one creation takes over just to keep us safe and just to make sure that the other ones, other personas that might be a little bit more fragile or might actually have those neurodivergent traits, are protected, right? So when we think about it, and going back to the idea of safety, in my mind, we mask so that we, and that kind of relates to like social baseline theory, we mask to create an environment and relationships that will help us to stay safe as well, right? So that we're accepted, so that we feel like we are accepted. At that point, not for who we really are, unfortunately, but we are to a degree accepted. Therefore, we stay fairly regulated, right? Of course we don't, because we now can talk about the toll of masking, right? And the impact of masking. But our idea is, I'm going to create the world for myself through masking where I'm fairly stable. You know, I'm not kind of just collapsing every day. I've seen it go really wrong. You know, as a therapist, I've worked with a lot of people for whom masking over the years and years and years, you know, finally culminated in burnout, in anxiety and depression, because we can't just upkeep this sense of fake safety and fake sense of self, in a way, false sense of self, again in Winnicott terms. But yeah, complex, really complex.
We must be kind to each other. I think when we approach the conversation, we must be kind to one another. And it's very easy for neurodivergent to be like, oh, neurotypicals are that, and we're like that, you don't understand us. But it's also almost systematically designed that way, that it's a little bit more difficult for those that are a little bit more different than the rest to stay there. Just you stay there. Like, you don't show everything out. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about neurodivergence within narcissistic family structures? Because I feel like this is almost how this whole play is, you know, coming to the surface, that neurodivergent people get used to hiding because they're almost always in these narcissistic or rather dysfunctional family structures, and from that point forward they learn it's not safe for me to be who I am anywhere, not just home, anywhere.
Well, we know how.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I'm sorry. I've got the tendency to just jump in whenever I feel like I know what to say. I really have an idea here. Again, something that relates to masking. Very often neurodivergent people connect through shared experiences, right? I don't know if you've came across that, but when I've learned about it, I was like, yes, this is me. Like, I struggled with that as a therapist. I had to really consciously make a decision not to always jump in and say, oh yeah, it happened to me too, you know, because for a lot of neurodivergent people, this ability to kind of relate in that way by showing that something happened to me as well, or showing it's not a sign of narcissism, for example, or a narcissistic trait, but it's a sign of how we connect to other people for that kind of shared
burst of joy.
yes, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, when we think about when we think about a child, right, growing up in a family, in an environment, everything matters. Everything matters. Try having a child when you're a psychotherapist. I don't recommend, really. You've got almost too much knowledge, and you question every move and every sentence you say. Long story short, any kind of trauma, right, can impact your experience of neurodivergence. It cannot make you neurodivergent, but it will impact your experience as a neurodivergent person. And growing up or being surrounded by people with narcissistic traits, or a narcissistic family, or a narcissistic primary carer, obviously will intensify this feeling of being inappropriate, being not important. It will definitely push you away from ever wanting or even thinking like you can explore your needs, right? And I think, and we probably will touch on it later on, that ability to recognize what our true needs are is very, very central to unmasking as well, right? It's not about just who I am, who am I? It's also really, really closely, in my mind, connected to ability to even have an idea of what your needs might be, what your emotional needs might be, what your priorities in terms of your needs might be. And obviously someone who grew up in the narcissistic environment, let's call it, the needs, what are you talking about? Yeah, your life, it's fine, doesn't matter, nothing else, yeah. So absolutely, that levels of masking will probably, most probably, obviously there is no one universal answer, but most probably be affected and be much higher for someone who has never been asked, really, what is it that you need? What is it that you want from here, from you, and from me? So yeah, definitely would have an impact, I think, personally. I don't think there are many studies. That's what it, that, as a therapist who works with neurodivergent clients, adult neurodivergent clients, let's say that, because that's quite important, there's not that much research still on how to do that, which is as a creative therapist, I've got that privilege of having quite a lot of research on how art psychotherapy, which I qualified to practice, how art psychotherapy can be used with your work with for example, autistic children. That's the majority of research. There's quite a chunky research there on how creativity and art psychotherapy can support autistic kids. And yes, some of that will translate onto your work with adults, of course. And I hope this research will grow, and it probably is growing as we speak. But that's why I'm mentioning all the different kind of theorists and psychotherapists, and because that's how I'm working with my clients. I have to draw from different baskets, different boxes, different schools of thought to kind of create something that works. And that also goes back to your first question, is it easier? Not yet. Not really. No.
It's more exciting. It's more colorful. I think the more
absolutely. No, yeah,
share our stories, the
and
more.
also, would there ever be one answer? I don't think, potentially there will not be, because the clue's in the name. Neurodivergent, we diverge from each other, from what we need, from how our needs look like, etc., and so on the very basic level. So yeah,
I do think, though, there is a way to rise above some of the challenges, but you have to be very playful and very creative with your own operational system, and you have to be able to face your own trauma, face your own limitations, whatever you see it or perceive as a limitation, and then rewire your conscious, subconscious, but also your belief system to the point where you're able to have a conversation with your own belief system at points of your journey where you think no.
Yeah.
And then you sit down and you have a chat with your belief system. It's like, okay, let's try.
Yeah, it goes down to to the world that's it's an ableist world, right? It's the world in which people who are fully able, both physically and mentally, cognitively, rule. They rule. Sorry, but that's I mean, we could argue with to a degree whether all people who rule are neurotypical, but the idea rules, right? That there is one normal that we all diverge from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you say, challenging your own belief around that, and maybe restructuring what does it mean to you to be able or not able, right? It's a good beginning. It could be a starting point, and it could be make or break. You probably can't feel fully comfortable with who you are if you don't agree that it's okay to be you, even if it's not normal or it doesn't fit the norm, right?
What is the norm?
Exactly, right? That's where we start. It's like we're told that there is a norm, but actually looking at people nowadays, looking at the world and the state of the world, do we want to accept that? We could very philosophically ask those very big questions. Like, I don't accept that norm. I don't want to accept that this is normal. This is not normal to me at all, what's happening in the world at the moment. So yeah,
I think
I would much rather.
Go one step further from your point. Those that rule the world, they're not necessarily all neurotypical. It's just that they would like to preserve their norm to be that of the neurotypicals because they're much easier to direct, control, manipulate. Because neurodivergent
Absolutely.
people are, because of their exclusion, they go within. They spend a lot of time analyzing things, so they can see the truth. They can pick up on the shift of emotions, on intentions that are not so positive. And it's very interesting that you mentioned your dissertation. Mine was on narcissism. It was related to TV series, but it was on narcissism. And I think my higher self was always guiding me. You need to research this because it's going to be important. Even though at the time I didn't pick up on the cues. I've always been interested in psychology and philosophy, but it was just like, okay, that's the next thing on my journey. Cool.
Love it.
But I came across this video about being the invisible child and what happens when you grow up. I think it was Dr. Ramani. She has a huge collection on narcissism, but she pretty much says when you have a narcissistic parent, that kind of tells you have to be small, you have to be quiet, and then you go into the school where it's a public space, it's a different environment. It's already been conditioned. I have to not stand out. So you might underperform because you have the instructions that you were given at home.
Yes.
But then those instructions don't change until you are old enough to change them yourself. So this might play out for years and years and years. And you might figure out, wait, I've been hiding my potential. I've been hiding from society because of those early instructions that were given to me when I was 5. Because we trust so much that first relationship with our parents.
Yeah.
So the studies are important, and I believe in their power one day to illuminate the way. And I would love to point that we need studies on every gender, not just the masculine psyche.
Yes, that's another thing. I mean, we know what's been happening in the world, right? We know that not only there was no diagnosis for adults for a very long time, women are still completely lost in the system, hugely underdiagnosed. And the statistics are rubbish because statistics don't take into consideration the fact that women are just not referred for the diagnosis. So therefore we think that there's less women who are neurodivergent, which I would definitely question. Not only I think there is huge number of women who are neurodivergent, but very often it's a joint diagnosis that applies to us as women. We've got very often traits that point towards ADHD and autism at the same time. So a lot of women get diagnosed when they actually pursue that, because that word, we have to pursue the diagnosis to get it. Like, how wrong is that? I've never thought about it like this. That question, have you pursued a diagnosis? And you're like, well, why would anyone pursue a diagnosis like that, right? And then there is that whole language around people wanting to be diagnosed, or this being trendy, and like, who would actually like to pursue this, right? Yes, of course, pursue it to get answers,
Mhm.
and maybe a lot of people need that to help themselves to understand and start further exploration, like a permission very often is needed. But who actually, yeah, that word, sorry, just shocked me when I said when I said it out loud. We have to pursue it, and when women pursue those diagnoses, very often they find out that they're actually ADHD, so autistic and ADHD. So the statistics, I think, are wrong at the moment. That show us, you know, that difference in how many women versus how many men are neurodivergent in the world. Yeah.
Mhm. And it's a spectrum. So just because you have both ADHD and autism doesn't mean that you have them at 10 every, all across the world. And also representation on media has shown us what autism looks like with severe cases where we
Yes.
have children who can't even speak, who can't even
Yeah.
have proper physical interactions with each other. That's the extremities being captured on camera. Then the parents are like, no, you're not autistic. And there's almost like this emotional, what's the word? I mean, it's very severe. I'm what about to say it? It's like emotional lobotomy where they're like, no, you're not this. And it's
Just
got
repress it. Just repress it as well, right? Like just push it away. Just
repress
no.
it. But now that we're ready to unmask, now that we're aware that we're masking, for those of us that have been masking, and we're not so bothered about sparing the feelings of those around us because we're ready to come out and share our story and show the world who we are with everything that comes with it. Wow, I think I've skipped the question here. How can you say you're masking? But
no, it's fine. Have you?
Well, I was going to say what activities help us to unmask, but I suppose we can pack those two
together.
How can one person tell they're masking, and what are the activities that help you to unmask? And I think we've already covered some of those. When some of the reactions might be negative at first from the people that we trust, the people that we love. I know personally, I completely detached from some people, and I didn't even let them in this new phase of my life because I thought it's a brand new start.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like explaining myself anymore.
Yeah.
I am ready to be who I am, and I want to see what happens. Who are the people that come forward with me? Who are the people that continue the journey with me? Because I just felt like I was dragging people with me, never fully being myself, always giving them a chance to catch up, and they never caught up with me. So I thought, this is it.
Yes. Yes. No, that happens a lot. Again, that's one of those shared experiences of a lot of people who go through the diagnosis process or decide to explore what have they been masking, what does it mean to unmask to them. A huge change and a huge shift, and some people lose people because just consciously making a decision that this person doesn't serve me anymore, or this person doesn't align with who I really am and who I need in my life or who I want in my life. To others it happens kind of behind the scenes, because not only you might be engaging or disengaging differently on a different level than what you've used to do, but also they might suddenly be like, oh no, actually this is not for me, and that's fine. We cherish relationships, and that's beautiful and great, but I think it's okay to outgrow some, to realize that they don't serve our current needs, and that's okay as well. I think we are a bit scared of that. Someone, we need or we don't need somebody. It's okay. I think this has to be validated. If this person does not fit in our life at the moment, it's fine. It's okay. It's not selfish, and I think that's very often associated with that idea of guilt and shame and feeling selfish about maybe moving away from certain people because they just don't fit with our lives anymore. When you said about explaining what masking is, and that people might now understand, I just thought, should I bring in a few examples just so before we talk about unmasking, because we went into the very philosophical, I feel like I went into a very psychotherapeutic philosophical explanation of what masking is, but just to kind of, for people who actually don't know, there are a lot of behaviors and processes that are associated with neurodivergence, right? you can probably already see that I'm not looking in the camera, for example, all the time. I'm allowing myself not to, because I don't like it. Not only I don't know where to look when I'm talking with someone on Zoom, but I just prefer to like have my pen in my hand and doodle whilst I'm talking. Or so I'm doing that. I'm unmasking, right? I'm not forcing myself against what is comfortable to me to do something, to perform in a certain way because it's expected, right? Just to give an idea of how that might practically look like to people who actually have no clue. And there are people who have no clue, and that's absolutely fine. We don't have to know everything about everything. Similarly, for me, I already talked about the urge to share. When someone shares an experience, for example, right? If you were to mask your neurodivergent trait, you would probably just sit there, maybe nod for somebody talking to you about something that you're really excited about and you want to kind of join in, right? Whilst when you're unmasking, you might be slowly starting to share those experiences and allow yourself, give yourself permission to bring something in, maybe against what feels right in the neurotypical world, because we are told that that might diminish, or this might minimize this person's experience because your experience will override it or become suddenly more important, right? Or you're not focusing enough on this other person. So I thought I'll just bring a couple of those in to just represent, show what masking might actually practically look like. Because now talking about first of all, how can we notice that we're masking? I think there's quite a lot, again, of differences in how people might notice that they're masked or have been masking for a prolonged period of time. In therapy, very often in therapy room, I meet with people who are already exhausted, burnt out, depressed. Anxiety might come first, because you might feel like none of the interactions that you enter with other people into or none of the relationships that you enter feel right. You might feel judged a lot. You might feel like you can never get into that kind of mode of feeling just free within the relationships or interactions with other people. You might start noticing, you might start catching yourself monitoring what you say, what you do, really vigilant, really observing yourself, pre-planning interactions. That's another one that a lot of people that I work with notice. Like, they ask me questions like, does everyone script everything they're gonna say before they meet a friend? Like, no, not everybody does that. But I've worked with people who literally throughout their lives have been pre-writing a script for each and every meeting with a friend, and because that was their reality for a very long period of time. It was only when they realized that not everyone does that, for example, that they start noticing that maybe that's a neurodivergent trait, or it might not be neurotypical. Let's not call it normal. So also, sometimes we get to the point where we start questioning, is this behavior that I'm exhibiting, or is that me? Is that really me? Because you might get a feedback from someone, and you kind of quite moved by that feedback, because it doesn't feel like this is what you were trying to bring into the relationship, or this didn't feel like what you thought you were bringing in, because you can get quite confused. Masking could get us into a corner where you no longer know who that person that is showing up is. And that's quite scary. And that can be quite overwhelming. And it can be extremely draining long term. So all of those kind of moments where you start thinking, who is this person that's showing up, might be the moments where you could start thinking about masking as a part of your life. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And as you were talking, I kept getting reminded that there are certain people that make me feel like I need to defend myself. And I'm preparing to enter conversations or interactions with them where I cannot avoid that, knowing that I'll have to defend myself. And the truth of the matter is you don't have to defend yourself. If you made a choice, it's because you wanted to make that choice. If you didn't make a choice, it's because you didn't want to make that choice. And you don't owe an explanation to anyone, whether they are your parent, your best friend, your boss at work. I mean, if it's not related to work, but rather social interactions and things that you're not being employed for. Your choices outside of anything that is a formal agreement, you have free will. And I think this is one of those things about neurodivergent people, is that we've experienced this pressure onto us to abandon our free will, because our
Yes.
free will confused people. We made
Yes.
choices that were unpredictable. We made choices that were strange. Even dancing outside on a sunny day, people are like, why are you dancing? It's sunny every day. You're like, but I want to enjoy today.
Yeah.
That's when your typical person is a strange behavior. And they
I've got a
try.
tattoo. I've got a tattoo that says "Please don't watch me dancing." Actually, that it was my first tattoo ever. Yeah, it's a phrase from a song, but yeah, very, very good point. I really like what you said. That statement about how the free will, how we're not allowing that aspect of ourselves to be there at all, right? It's just kind of acting according to the rules and prescripted, kind of very prescriptive ways of behaving, right?
And you're always expecting that, but why did you do that? Oh, you're already anticipating the questions that are going to arrive from those same people that you've engaged with for years.
Yeah.
But why did you do that? And the questioning is there. And you're like, I am free from the judgment of others. The judgment of others is not my judgment. This decision feels good. It's in alignment with my intuition. It's in alignment with what I want to do one day, whether it's maybe you're pursuing artistic ambitions. That's always going to confuse people that are rooted into that.
On so many different levels.
Yeah. But it's part of how we alchemize some of the negative emotions. To me, art has been alchemy, where I could channel some of those heavy emotions, some of the rejection, some of the neglect, and some of the confusion that people could never really understand who I am. I don't need to carry that with me. I can channel it into my art, and then it lives through something that can help somebody else.
Yeah, very Jungian, that. Very, very nice. Alchemy and archetypes and all of those things that happen when we engage with creativity, I think will always be on my list of how to, right? Of how to go deeper, of how to start exploring the kind of deeper and true sense of self. In a way, when you are living with the mask or through the mask, it's kind of coded. Everything about you becomes like a code, doesn't it? It kind of it's hidden. It's not there. It's not just available. You know, someone can, you can't just unmask here and now. You know, like you can't just suddenly. As I use that comparison of just wearing them, it's not that you can just take it off and live your life, right? It's a process. It's a work. You know, bringing alchemy in. It's the alchemical work in the laboratory of life, where you have to find out what elements you need actually to achieve what you need to and you want to achieve, right? Which elements will bring you what you need, which elements will get you to the point that you want to be at. And I find that beautiful. And I think we are, as I said already today, I think we are more than just one thing. So taking the mask will not just instantly reveal who I am, because I'm more than just this, and I'm more than there's a sum of many elements that constitute and who I am, right? So that self-curiosity will be one of the extremely important aspects of unmasking. You know, and when I introduce myself as a therapist, I say that I work with self-curious people, because I think that element is extremely important for anyone who wants to truly access therapy or the process of unmasking. You have to get to the point where you allow yourself to be curious about who you are. And that's so much fun. I find, scary. Yes, don't get me wrong. Super scary, because who knows? There might be pretty and there might be ugly things there. Again, Jungian terms, there is a shadow, right?
Who's the judgment? Who's the judge, rather?
But then who's the judge? Exactly. But then we think about, a lot of neurodivergent people experience rejection sensitive dysphoria. There's a lot of the baggage that comes with neurodivergence as well. So there are the way neurodivergent person experiences the world is overall different, right?
Mhm.
So there might be hurdles, the difficulties, the fears that are much more intense or much less present in somebody's life. So when it comes to unmasking and learning, it's about learning so much about yourself, and some things will be scary, some things you'll like, some things you'll dislike. But I think two things, that self-curiosity and what you've already named as well, this exploration of in a way internalized potential ableism, right? That the fact that the world has an expectation for you to be in a certain way, and how does that describe and create the person that you are.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think those are two kind of big elements, and then finding a safe, affirming community to do all of that in and with. I think those are definitely helpful, I think, starting points. So somewhere you can feel safe, people that you can feel safe with or around, to explore yourself and the ideas that hold you back maybe as well.
And if you can't find a community, that's your sign to start your community. And maybe just start your community with something that you've created. And then around that, invite people to engage with it, because that's going to be your
Absolutely.
invitation for people to take a look inside. The brilliant,
And
scary.
think about going beyond your immediate kind of
Mhm.
relationships and immediate community that already exists, because it might not fit, it might not be
Yeah,
that, it might not serve that purpose, and you can have more than one. You don't have, as I said,
absolutely.
you're
Yeah,
not just one thing. None of us is. So you might have a community for people who love eating pasta,
I love pasta.
because I'm clearly hungry. My subconscious is surfacing here. Um, but at the same time, you also will be a member of the neurodivergent community of sorts, and at the same time, you might be, yeah. I don't want to make
Dog
anyone.
owners, proud
Yeah,
dog owners.
there she is. Yes. Hey, Murph. Hello. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't exclude one another, right? And you might still be friends with people who you have been friends with on a different level to your new friends from your neurodivergent community. And again, there doesn't have to be a battle. There doesn't have to be a fight. That doesn't have to be abandonment of certain parts of yourself. It might need to be just a bit of restructuring
Mhm.
and rethinking of how can you integrate, because it is about integrating all of those different elements. How can you integrate that into your life that you understand a little bit better, right? That you
Mhm.
now maybe approaching with a little bit more, awareness. Such a big word.
Awareness, appreciation. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful point that you made, that we each see the world differently. But if you think about it, the world is the same. So imagine if we were
Mm,
to pair up neurodivergent, neurotypical side by side, and we were to help each other with the different ways that we're seeing the world. Because, for example, I don't go out into the world and think to myself, who can I speak to? But I know neurotypicals love to communicate a lot more. They're a little bit more extroverted than
yes.
neurodivergent. Not to say that I don't love talking to people. It's just that my first thought is not going to be that. My first thought is, where can I find the inspiration, or where can I find a
Mm,
messenger of hope? I don't know, something a little
yeah.
bit more artsy and creative. Whereas the neurotypical person might bring more of a practical, grounded. Who can I
Mm,
ask for this, or who can I talk to? But there's always that, who can I connect to? So imagine if even business building
yeah.
became that two co-founders, one is neurodivergent, one is neurotypical, and they
Mm,
bring their greatest skills together to shape a really strong foundation that sets an example that we can work together, and
yeah.
we should work together. This, just because we are wired differently doesn't mean that we're not supposed to work together. It's just that knowing who we are and what we bring to the symbolic table allows
Mm.
us to operate with more joy. Hey, I
Oh,
might be
100%.
lacking some of the energy to interact with new people today, but I can give you 5 ideas. How does that sound? Obviously,
Yeah.
not encouraging people to engage in these transactional relationships, but rather to
No.
view that they each bring something unique into the world and into relationships as a result.
Yeah. That would be absolutely amazing.
That's the
I
dream.
mean, yeah, don't try to do it with two neurodivergent. I'm joking, but my partner's neurodivergent. There are very limited number of facts that I share kind of quite openly as a therapist with the world, simply because of what we're being taught and etc. and so on. But I found that kind of consciously deciding which elements from my own personal life I'm sharing helps people to relate to me and helps me to work with people in a very human, person-centered approach. So yes, here we go. I'm in a relationship where my partner is also neurodivergent, and chaos, pure chaos. I'm joking, but also beautiful creativity.
Dancing
Just
star is born from a chaos. Wasn't that the quote by Nietzsche? So
yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful chaos here, and it's challenging, you know. It's challenging, and almost like you said, we are all very different, and that's going to sound so kind of basic, but we can all learn from each other, you know. It's like, yeah, every relationship is allowed, and it doesn't mean it's transactional, but we are allowed to take things from those relationships, and we're allowed to learn, and we're allowed to grow through all of those relationships. And yes, being a little bit more open to people who are in any way different can only bring growth, can only help us to extend the way we see things. And that's beautiful, right? Like, we're talking about people different culturally, people different in terms of their abilities, you know, we are oddly pre-programmed to surround ourselves with people who are similar, right? And when yes, indeed, when people are starting a company, very often they're looking for someone who aligns with them, right? And that's great, and I understand why. But at the same time, challenging that and building a team where everyone brings something completely different might be more difficult to manage, yes, and you might need to be a bit more creative about how you will be managing this kind of team. But imagine the results. You know, if people can bring their uniqueness and unique approaches and unique information, unique knowledge, experiences, geez,
that's the
I see
future
it.
of workplaces.
I
In
think
my
so. I
view.
think, and I've been reading about it quite a lot as well, and I see that there are certain, I don't know anything about that because I work as a self-employed psychotherapist, but work dynamics, don't know that much about it. I'm not going to pretend I know things about everything, but yeah, I've been reading about this way of structuring kind of teams where you're actually focusing on everybody's unique strengths and abilities and styles of being within the team. And I think that is the future indeed. Yeah.
Extracting the authenticity. Now, there are some dangers, once again, that we don't power too much the economy at the expense of overworking ourselves, even if the mission is noble and inspiring, because
Yes.
we as neurodivergent people love to work for things that fill our soul. And one thing to mention here is when you're engaging with neurotypicals, don't be fooled by the small chat. There is depth in every single person. And I know it might take a little bit longer, but I remember when I declared to the world, because I was doing a self-growth challenge, I'm done with small talk. The level of conversations that I unlocked was insane. And with people that I would normally hit just a wall or like surface level, we were able to have these big conversations because I declared this is a safe space.
Permission. You've given a
to talk about
permission, right?
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was my declaration. It was like,
Yeah.
if you wanna engage on a deeper level, I'm holding
I'm
this
here.
safe space. Yeah. So
Yeah,
we
that
as
safe space.
neurodivergent can do that.
The whole circle, right? We all need that safe space, and it will look very differently for all of us, right?
Absolutely.
But it gives a permission, definitely, and it gives a permission to explore, to be, to grow. I mean, in a very basic terms, when we think about that safety of the space, you know, that's why we go to therapy, right? Because in principle, therapy mimics that desired safe space.
To be who you are.
Yeah, to be who you are, and to grow into who you are, and to all of those very, very important things can only happen if you feel safe. You know, like the old school Maslow pyramid, right?
Mhm.
The self-actualization is somewhere on the
Needs.
very top, right? All the other needs have to be met. So you need to feel safe, you need to feel fed, you need to feel secure, you need to feel that those physical needs are met, those and just at the very tippy top, when all of this is there, you can start thinking about the inner world and the growth.
I think it might be reversed or flipped upside down for neurodivergent people, because at least I've noticed resistance when it comes to
Mm,
self-care, when it comes to eating, when it comes
we
to
forget, yes.
exercising. If my emotional needs are met, if my self-actualization is not there
Mm,
as the foundation, what is the point? So it's a little bit
yeah.
flipped. I think for neurotypicals, it's exactly what Maslow created:
Mm,
eat, exercise, and then think about your goals. For us, it's the
yeah.
other way around.
Yeah,
My
I
goal for
think
the
it's all mumble
day.
jumbled for us, to be honest. It's like
Yeah.
a bit of this. I might forget about that, but today, today I want to learn how to cook pasta, so I'll eat a lot of pasta. But
You're
tomorrow,
having an exciting lunch today, I can tell
the
that.
pasta keeps coming back. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, but yeah, no, I agree. I agree absolutely. And there is something about, because when we think about executive functioning for neurodivergent people, it doesn't quite, very often it needs a little bit more attention, right? So that that set of cognitive processes that are there to kind of help us to manage the regulation of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, all of that. It doesn't quite work the same as it does for neurotypical people, does it?
Mhm.
And yes, through coaching and therapy, you can get to the point where you help yourself through that, and you are a little bit more able to achieve those goals in the way that, yeah, in a little bit more of an ordered way, let's say. But I think, in principle, we were just a little bit more messy. Although, then there will be an autistic individual who will have to have everything quite organized, but the messiness might come from the fact that they will spend time organizing one thing but completely not focusing,
Not
for
negative.
example, on
Mhm.
their physical well-being, let's say, right? So yeah, there's definitely, well, famously, as clue is in the name, attention differences,
Mhm.
and the way we pay attention to things are different. Therefore, also our needs will require different levels and different approach. Paying attention to our needs and fulfilling our needs will work a little bit differently for neurodivergent people.
It's a complex. We're not going to find the answer in one sentence. And one
No,
thing that
we're not going to find an answer in one sentence. Absolutely not. No.
one thing that came to mind before I ask you the final question, which is more emotionally charged, is speaking about the masks. We might have the person that's hiding behind a mask and you don't know who they are. But
Mm,
you might also have the person that's hiding behind the mask of Wonder Woman or Batman, the people that try to save the day. And because
yeah.
they are wired with the ability to channel more ideas into the world, or to just
Mm,
be the problem solver that always has a solution, they might overgive and give and give until there's this exhaustion that burns them to the point of total collapse. So there is almost that danger of declaring your neurodivergency as the answer to all the problems in the world. Sure, you have a mission. We all have a purpose in life.
mm,
And because you are neurodivergent, you've been gifted with certain skills that maybe not many people have, but that doesn't mean that you should overwork yourself to the point of total exhaustion so that you can be of service. You are of service just by
mm,
being who you are. And this
yeah.
has taught me a lot of time to embrace for myself, jumping
Mm,
between the two. Today I'm going to hide, today I'm going to be saving the day. And where's the middle ground? What's
yeah.
my value in this world if I'm nowhere in particular?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, that safety, right, comes in. The
Mhm.
safety where you recognize um, e- safety and permission, right, to choose what is it going to be today. What is my priority today? What is my need today? What is it that will make me feel safe, secure, fulfilled, comfortable? I think comfort is big, and I think I've not mentioned this word today. But when it comes to masking, obviously, masking comes from the need for comfort, for finding comfort, right? And then unmasking can be quite uncomfortable. But
Mhm.
again, the ultimate purpose should be to find comfort again. but a different kind of comfort, a comfort with who you are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this brings me to my final question, which is, what emotion should we expect
Mm,
when unmasking? And I know we mentioned the word grief. I can
yeah.
add sadness and anger into the mix as well. So long as we're not fully consumed by them, I think it's okay to process them, to allow ourselves to feel them. But it
Mm,
is an emotional process. When you are ready to show who you are to the world and get to know who you are as well, because you might have some questions for yourself. That's normal.
oh, yeah. Yeah, I would be surprised if you didn't,
Mhm.
really. Yeah. Yeah. And look at that. All of those are quite negative, but or at least they come from the place again in the
Of the
ableist
shock.
community world where we see them as negative, right? But they don't need to be negative. Um, Also, there is a relief, I
The
think.
liberation.
Yeah, for a lot of us, uh, somewhere there, or actually, probably, maybe even initially, it's like I'm gonna just do this.
Finally. Mhm.
Yeah, but then, like the stages, and the old school stages of grief, yes, but it might look completely different. It doesn't have to be linear in any way. It might come in waves. It might feel like,
Mhm.
as you said, one day you might need to adapt a sort of mask, but maybe it's not a mask anymore. Maybe it's just that one of those personas more so, which you safely explore and you safely adapt to help yourself for different stages and different hurdles, different moments in your life. Um, but yeah, the emotions are big. That's one
Mhm.
universal answer to this question, I suppose. Big emotions, and varied, and and it will shift and fluctuate because that is life. And this is, on a good day, and your typical person might feel quite conflicted about themselves, right? About decisions we make, about choices, about all of those things. And when you think about shifting, especially as a late diagnosed person or a person who's exploring their neurodivergence after 20, 30, 40, 50 years of living
Mhm.
in a certain way, it will feel big, big grief, big confusion, maybe big anger.
Mhm.
There will be big emotions. And that's why, what can I say? Therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy is one of the routes, yes. And obviously you might feel safe enough to explore it yourself, but there is therapy there, and there are safe spaces like that, safe communities, safe therapists, neuroaffirmative groups. There are people who you can relate to your big moment, to your big
Neurodivergent
feelings.
Anonymous. But not
Yeah,
so
yeah.
anonymous because
People
we're
don't
doing
want to be
now.
anonymous about it. That's the thing. And there is a beauty in that as well,
Mhm.
right? There is this thing where, like, no, you don't have to be anonymous. You've
Yeah.
done nothing wrong. You've done nothing to be ashamed of. This shouldn't be impacting, your career, your life. You should be open, should be able to be open about it, unless you don't want to. And that's also why therapy is an option, because you could just do it in that space if you don't feel like you want to shout to the world about it, and you don't need to be a person who wants to do that. Yeah, so again, just proves that there is no right or wrong, and there's no one settled, one chosen, one preferred way of doing
Mhm.
that, of approaching this. um Body, I think body is also quite important, just because I haven't mentioned the body yet. When I think about what we experience whilst unmasking, I think it's one tip, I suppose, is to listen to what's happening in your body as well as your mind, because your body knows. Your
Mhm.
body also has been shaped by what you've been experiencing for the last how many years, however many years it's been, and paying attention to what your body is telling you about your experiences is helpful. I think kind of being a little bit more attuned to what the body is signaling will come with unmasking as well. So you might feel different things in your body as much as you'll feel them emotionally. Um, so be watchful and be mindful of that, you might be more or less tired. You might feel like you want to start running to kind of express that energy, that excitement or whatever it brings, that yeah. So I would say pay attention to both physical and emotional experiences that it brings. Don't forget about the body.
There's also a little bit of delayed processing. So you might experience some
Mm.
shifts in the way that you view people around you, because finally you're giving yourself permission to feel how you truly feel about them, especially if somebody wronged you in some way and now your body's signaling, I don't trust that person.
Yeah.
Trust
Yeah.
your body, because your
Yeah.
body is working with the intuition to
Yes.
signal to you, keep your
Yep, I
distance
agree.
from a particular person.
Yeah, definitely listen. Just listen, right? I think when we mask, we also, to a degree, are listening, obviously, to what we need, and acting in a way that we're acting because we feel, we think, we've learned that this is needed to stay safe. But then when we start exploring who we really are and what we really need, keep listening to yourself, to your body. Yeah,
Living more consciously. I think we're
absolutely.
smart. We're designed in a super smart way. And so even the coping mechanisms that we employ, that's happening on an unconscious level most of the
Mm,
time. We're just acting, so this is going to give me the best chance to survive this
yeah,
situation. But when
yeah,
you're consciously there and you can make the choice, hey, do I want to act from the trauma, or do I want to act from the more balanced place? You have
mm,
those extra 5 seconds, let's call them 5 seconds, where you
yes,
can change the route. You can change the way that you're going to progress with the rest of your day or
yeah,
life, depending on how big the choice you need to make. But the more you have that, the more you give yourself that space, and the more you listen, the more that space where you need to make that time is going to increase.
yes,
Maybe 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Suddenly you're going to have all the space, and you're going
yeah,
to start to breathe into it as well. It's going to be a living,
beautiful.
breathing space. One final thing I want to add as a reflection. Usually, it was the people around you that didn't allow you to be who you are. And maybe
Mm,
you picked those people, maybe they picked you, maybe it was mutual. But now that you're beginning to give yourself permission to be who you are, who you came here to be, who you want to be next, those same people might not accept you changing. And
yeah,
it's okay to continue on your own. It's okay to continue while still loving them from a distance. And I think this is
mm,
one of the aspects that many people don't talk about, is that when you understand who you are and that you're neurodivergent,
mhm,
you might not get the support of the people that you trust the most, love the most, because
yeah,
maybe they don't agree with it. Maybe they don't resonate with your journey, where it's going forward. Maybe they're just not there emotionally. I don't know. There are many reasons, but don't
mm,
try to force that onto them. There are
no,
many people that want to support you that you haven't met yet. And I think this is something that I'll probably say to my younger self, because
mm,
I trusted myself the most, and I powered through a lot of things on my own. But now I know there are many people that can hold space for me, and it's okay. I've
yeah,
made it on the other side, but it's okay. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's great. That's a great thought to end with, I think. There's so many people, right? Um, yeah, grief and loss will happen, and that's a part of our lives. But there will be people who are ready to kind of welcome you and support
Mhm.
you. And, if you feel lonely, and there's no shame in reaching out to specialists as well. It's a thing that I think very often, again, is still associated with shame or guilt. Like, oh, I've got no friends and I have to go to therapy, or I've got no friends and I have to, go to some sort of group or something, like pretend that those are my people. No, those are really your people. And there is no shame in that, in
Mhm.
admitting that you need to potentially pay someone to support you as well. I think there needs to be a shift there as well, that
It's
sometimes.
conversational therapy, isn't it? You
Mm,
literally having a conversation. It doesn't have to be about a
no,
specific trauma or wound. It's just
no, absolutely, therapy is to create space for you, and that's it, really. That's where it starts. It gives you space, and then you fill up that space with whatever you need. It's
Mhm.
such a privilege. Like, I always talk about it. I'm like, gee, imagine you've got just that space that can be 120% about you and for you,
Yeah.
and fulfill just your needs. So it could be, I see it as a good place to to also search for who you are and what you need.
Yeah, because oftentimes the alternative is getting together with people that you don't even like, doing things that are damaging to you, behaviors that might potentially be even dangerous to you. Imagine getting drunk and losing control over your body. Yeah, we know what happens in the world, and
just admit to yourself, that some things are not serving you. They're not useful for you, and that's okay. I think I said that before. I think there is, again, that guilt and shame associated with letting people go from your life. But you sometimes just have to, and that's okay.
Let yourself grow.
Absolutely.
Because your wings are starting to make it uncomfortable for you to ignore them, and you're ready to take flight into the world. Symbolic.
Yeah, very nice. I like that.
I absolutely enjoyed our conversation, Polly. It was fantastic to hear your insights and learn more about your work with neurodivergent people and supporting the neurodivergent communities around the world, because I'm sure that just because you're working in a particular country doesn't mean that there aren't people outside of that country that are taking inspiration from you or even engaging in the things that you're doing.
I've been very lucky. I worked with people from many different places in the world. Very, very lucky, very privileged to be in the position to sit with people and witness the stories.
Witness the stories. I think this is my intention for 2025, making more stories of those hidden brilliant brains, whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, just a lot of people that have been hiding, to share who they are with the world, because that's how we connect, that's how we change. And I know that you're building a neurodivergent community in 2025.
Yeah, I hope so. Yes, I've applied for some funding from Arts Council. We'll see how it goes, but I would love to create an accessible space, the space that is not, based on how much you can afford or any of those kind of limitations that unfortunately are put onto neurodivergent people, everywhere. Like the cost of diagnosis itself, if you don't want to wait 4 years, is horrible, painful, just kind of shameful, really. So I would love to create a space that's fully open, fully welcoming and neuroaffirmative, for people to kind of use their creativity and art to process certain things. So we'll see what happens, but I'm also looking forward to 2025 and also looking forward to more stories. So we're definitely aligning with that. Thank you for having me. It's been brilliant. It's been really nice to kind of put my thoughts together on that topic and share that.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to co-create this episode with you, and I'm looking forward to doing it again sometime in 2025. There it is. Yes. More intention set into the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for watching or listening.
My dog is leaving too.